When was the last time you took a leap of faith, trusting that everything is going to work out? Do you crave growth, or are you merely content with the status quo? If you want more out of your life, out of your career, and out of your relationships, you are in the right place. Take the leap and discover how to create a life by design rather than living it by default. Real success starts with you. Now here's your host, Colleen Biggs.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Take the Leap. I am your host, Colleen Biggs. We are on episode 212. I like the number 2. Don't know why, but I do. And we're on episode 212. So I'm excited to have Zachary Palmer here. He was introduced to me by such a good friend of mine, Steve Ramona. I love him so much. Him and I refer business back and forth to each other and individuals. And he's another leader out there leading with a servant heart and servant leadership, and has a YouTube show. He also has a podcast. So you got to go check that out. I'll drop that in our notes for today. Love my friend Steve. So happy that he introduced me to Zachary. And after I talked to Zachary, I was like, you got to be on my show because I really like your energy. I like who you are. I like what you're doing. And he's all about the power of proximity. And I talk about that a lot, not only on the podcast, but from stage, on how important our social capital is and the people that we're surrounding ourselves with. So we're going to dive into that a little bit more today. But before we do, I do want to thank the sponsor of our show, Alley Spine Center. And what sets our office apart from other offices is our focus on expertise in treating degenerative spinal conditions, including disc disease, bulging herniated disc, spinal stenosis, neuropathy, sciatica pain, tingling, and numbness in the arms, hands, legs, and feet, as well as severe and chronic neck pain and headaches. We specialize in corrective care, not just the treatment of symptoms with physical medicine modalities. And in most cases, pre and post images are used to help determine the structural improvement of the spine. So if you or someone you know is suffering from any of that neck and back pain we discussed, and you haven't experienced chiropractic in an integrative corrective care office, please contact them at 480-809-4700, or you can visit them at alleyspinecenter.com. If you're not located in the Phoenix area, that's okay. They know offices all across the United States that can help you with corrective care. So that's the most important part. And thank you, Alley Spine Center, for being the sponsor of today's show. All right, let me introduce Zach Palmer to you. He's known as the sales and persuasion strategist because as someone who has grossed over 150 million in sales, he's been a top speaker for people like Tony Robbins. And now he's helping companies like yours create high performance sales teams that consistently crush it. He says the key to his success was the power of proximity. He found a way to surround himself with the best in the world so he could become one of the best in the world. His mission is to simplify the complexities of business and develop high performance leaders that create predictable results and maximum impact. Zach, welcome to today's show.
Thank you, Colleen. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's so great to have you. So everyone's like, ooh, I know the name Tony Robbins. What is that all about? So go back because you were really, really young. And I want everyone to really get an idea of who you are as a person before we get into how amazing you are as a sales strategist. Let's go back to like 19. So you didn't have any, obviously you just got out of high school. You don't really have any formal business schooling. And you take over a family business. Tell me what happens there.
Well, it was exactly that. I was going to college. I wasn't enjoying the experience. I remember if it was Mark Twain or who it was, but the quote that always sticks in my mind is, "I never let my schooling get in the way of my education." And at that particular time, I wasn't enjoying formal schooling, and I was looking for an outlet. My parents had a specialty retail business. So we sold home and commercial exercise equipment, one of 2 facilities in the nation that were duly licensed for both. And it was kind of a means to an end. I just said, "Hey, Dad, you mind if I take a break from school? I don't want to waste any of your or my hard-earned money. This is not the best thing for me at the moment." So it was just supposed to be a temporary break, and I joined the business. And then within a year, they had the opportunity to move back to Hawaii. And he said, "Hey, you think you can run this thing?" And I said, "Sure," for some particular reason. But like you said, with no formal business schooling, no education, and that was 2005. So for the first 2 years, I managed to grow the business fairly significantly. And what you really need to know, it's a pretty important part of the story, is when I took over the company, it was only doing about $300,000 a year in gross revenue, but it was over $800,000 in debt. So I had a major uphill battle
Mm.
and didn't really realize how significant of a uphill battle that was going to be. So I grew the business pretty substantially over the first 2 years, moved and expanded the business in 2007 to incorporate boutique personal training studios, kind of a high-end luxury experience. It was supposed to make it feel like you're at home in a nice luxury home. And then 2008 happens and the carpet gets pulled out, the revenue goes down by 50%. And it was the beginning of 7, 8, 9, 10 years of the most challenging years of my life because I had no real skill sets or life experience to lean into as it pertained to how to really effectively run a business. I mean, from a leadership standpoint, from the standpoint of sales, marketing infrastructure, operational infrastructure, I mean, anything. And I found myself constantly looking for people and resources. One of the biggest challenges was what we have a tendency to do is hire people to solve a problem. But a
Mhm.
lesson I learned the hard way was unless you have developed that skill set and knowledge base around the thing that you are trying to hire for, you're not going to be able to hire anybody that is levels above you. So you might be sold very effectively on something, but the likelihood of those people actually producing or executing on the promises that they make usually ends up being pretty low. And that's what happened to me over and over and over. I'd make some progress, hire an expert to come in and help in a particular area. And then it was just muddy going down the toilet. So eventually I just thought, this is enough. So first thing I started was marketing, and I started going to a variety of different fitness experts and conferences and increasing my knowledge skill sets in those areas. And then it was leadership development and sales processes. And sales is something that had always come fairly organically to me. Just as by nature who I am, I love people and I loved what I was selling. And I think having that conviction in the
Mm.
product and the service I know it was absolutely paramount. But you couple that with another piece of my story. I'm actually legally disabled, at least on paper. I have it was a little bit of a football injury that left me with, at least on paper, permanent partial disability. So, I mean, I used to have days, weeks, months at a time for a 4-year period where I couldn't bathe myself, dress myself, anything. So, because of it, I took my education to extreme lengths on the training side. And long story short, for those 10 years, it just felt like a constant struggle, like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And it got exhausting. I mean, anybody that's been in business can relate to the fact that it can be very lonely at times. And when you don't know what you don't know, it's really difficult to see the forest through the trees. Like you get these moments of hope, inspiration, and then something happens. Business is a perpetual game of whack-a-mole, or solving one problem and moving on to the next, right?
Whack-a-mole is a
And
good visual for sure. Yeah.
right, it's that's just really what it felt like. I mean, you couple that with the number of sleepless nights of not knowing where the next check's going to come from. I mean, I distinctly remember a period of time like sitting on my office floor crying, wondering how I'm going to make payroll the next day, how I'm going to be able to pay the rent, this huge stack of payables due. Those are just the immediate payables, not to mention that mountain of debt that we had behind us. And I just remember asking myself, like, Zach, there's got to be a better way. Now, what
Mhm.
can we do? And I'd been searching so far for so long. At some point, I realized being myopic in terms of continuing to look to the local market to solve next level problems was probably not going to be the solution. And at
Mhm.
some point, an ad pops up. And I made a decision to make a call. And it was a decision to go to an event that was the biggest investment that I had ever made in myself and my business without any type of guaranteed return. It's like not like we're talking financial strategy where, you have some kind of predictive analysis when it comes to investing and where if I put my money here, I might be able to accomplish this average rate of return and so on, mitigate risk. This was something that really came down to me. And I remember talking to my dad, said, Dad, I want to make this investment. I think this is what we need to take the business to the next level. It's an outstanding education. It's like absorbing the best of the best from all the most successful people in the world in all categories of business. And he looked at me and he's like, no, you're absolutely crazy. You're not going to spend that kind of money. There's not a chance in hell. He's like, you're smart. Look how much you've accomplished on your own already. You don't need to do this. But some part of me thought, yes, I do. I'm tired of the fight. I'm tired of the struggle. So without telling him, I took out a personal loan, made the investment, and went to the event. And I came back and managed to double or triple my business year after year for the next 3 years. And that was one of several points of impetus where I made a new decision that completely changed the trajectory of my life, put me in rooms with people that where I actually felt normal. You're actually surrounded by other entrepreneurs that are going through some of the same challenges, and many other entrepreneurs that have gone through those challenges decades before and are now light years ahead of you. And you start realizing a really important lesson. One, success leaves clues. It's one thing to go learn from somebody that is professing something philosophically. It's a whole nother thing to go learn from the experts that are actually doing it, that are executing, that are crushing, that have built these really successful businesses. So success leaves clues, but now I got to get around those people. So how do I put myself in more of these rooms? How do I surround myself with a higher caliber of individual in terms of their personal beliefs, in terms of their professional skill sets? And I'm not just talking business. That was the evolution, is that because like people that hold themselves to a higher standard with their health, people that hold themselves to a higher standard in their interpersonal relationships with their kids, with their spouse or significant other, with their spirituality, the personal growth in every area of life. And that moment was a major turning point in how I started to look at the people I surround myself with, the investments that I'm willing to make. Is it a little bit of a risk? Sure. But what better risk can you take than investing in you? So that was a short version of the story.
No, that was beautiful because it really explained your journey, and so many nuggets came out of that. And the one thing I heard you say was you knew inside that you needed to make that investment, even though your dad didn't see it. Maybe your dad was old school, or he really, I mean, when we look back generations, he really probably didn't have a clue of what it was that the business would need. And in that generation, which I know that generation, we're taught hard work, just work harder, work harder, work harder. And the working harder doesn't work. You've got to work smarter. And the only way to work smarter is to get knowledge, get elevated somehow, get empowered. And all of that comes through other people. Right. And I love that you talked about once I started getting into these rooms and I started feeling normal, I was around people that were experiencing what I was experiencing and people that had already done it. I literally got into a room the other day for the first time and was personally invited. And we're looking at opening a brick and mortar for one of our catering businesses that we have in 2026. And it's a pizza business. And the gentleman said, I ran 2 pizza units for over 20 years. And I'm like, I'm in the right room. This guy's already done it. He knows exactly everything I need to know way ahead of time before I even get there. And he's going to tell me, don't do this. It's like a friend, that's why I love franchising. My husband and I also franchise. And what I love so much about franchising is like, we've made all the mistakes. We've already done them all. You don't have to make the mistakes. You just get the beauty of the business and the support and to be able to grow it. But, you don't have to go through all of the things we went through to get it to where it is today.
Why pay the dumb tax? It's why pay the dumb tax.
Tax. I love it.
One of my favorite expressions is there's nothing dumber than running the wrong direction enthusiastically.
Yeah.
And so often we do that because it's coming from the heart. But when you haven't learned the lenses, how to assess any given situation, anticipate the problems, the challenges, the roadblocks, which that's the beauty of the franchise models is, to your point, I mean, you're getting a turnkey business where they already have a blueprint written out for what
Yeah.
you need to succeed. And when you follow that blueprint and execute, you're very likely to have the success
Yeah.
you desire.
Yeah. Love it so much. So you had so much in there that was perfect. And the power of proximity, name someone that you remember, name something someone told you once that just stuck with you, or you applied it and it changed your life. And you didn't necessarily have to pay that person, but that person was in proximity of you in the same room. Maybe you had paid to be in a mastermind or whatever it was, and there was an individual in the room. I just remember there's been times where people look at me and they see things from a different perspective than I do, right? And they're like, "You're not seeing it, are you?" And I'm like, "No, what am I not seeing?" And they're like, "You need to sell. You need to sell that business and you need to do X, Y, and Z." And I'm like, "Oh, that's the pain part." Like, "Oh, no, I don't want to do that." And they're like, "Yeah." And the writing's on the wall. And then everyone else in the room is like, yeah, we're all seeing it too. And it's
Mhm.
like, why didn't I see this? How did I not recognize? And I love it when there are powerful people in the room that are not afraid to also share something with you that you might not recognize, for you to then recognize it. It's like it didn't exist until they
Mhm.
said it. And then they said it, and you're like, wow, I didn't even think about that. And I think that's the power of that, just the simple power of having other people around us. And we'll get into the greater power of the proximity, but just the advice, simple advice.
Do you mind if I share
Yes.
two stories from
I mean,
either
I
end of the
don't
spectrum
mind.
that'll paint
I
a
want
picture?
you to share. Yeah.
Great. So, what's really fascinating about this, and I had forgotten, I think I think this was around 2010. So, just a couple years into the 2008 crisis. And our local university, I'm from a small town in the northwest corner of the United States originally, Bellingham. It's an hour and a half north of Seattle, 30 minutes from the Canadian border. It's the most beautiful place in the world for about 3 months out of the year. The other 9 months, it's a little,
It's
wet, gray, everything they say
awful.
about it, right? But it is beautiful. But we have at the local university, they had a division that was specifically allocated to help support small businesses. And they did a lot of um, charity work, so to speak. And I remember signing up for an evaluation. My dad's like, "Hey, I found this really, really cool resource. No reason not to take advantage of it." And I signed up. And I remember walking into the office. I had all of my financial statements, profit and loss and statement of cash flow and everything, right? And I walk it to him. And I'll never forget the guy's face. He's looking at our financial documents, and I remember him sliding his chair back, looking at me and going, "Zach, this does not look good." He's like, if you continue on this path, the probability of your business succeeding is way below 1%. He goes, you have no money, no resources, no credit to apply for anything. He's like, you're massively in debt. I think the wisest decision that you could make right now would be to close your doors. And that was like a knife to the heart. It's family
Mhm.
business, been around for 20 something years at that stage. And I'm going, then I felt like a failure. You're not really realizing what what I had stepped into, but I felt like a failure. But some part of me said, I can do this. And I put what he said, I compartmentalized it, I shoved it way down into that box in the back of my mind that I never want to hear from again. And I got down to work. And I managed to turn that failing company into a high seven-figure valuation, of which I was able to give back to my parents for their retirement. So the first lesson is trust your gut. If you don't
Mm.
believe the advice, that if something doesn't resonate with you about the advice you're receiving from another expert or professional, trust your gut and do what you believe to be right anyway. First principle. Second, when I was at an event, actually in Fiji, and I was working with one of my coaches, and this is probably 13 years later. I remember asking him, he's become a really good friend of mine, Justin, just an incredible human in general. But I remember asking him, we were on a little break and we were in a back room. I don't remember exactly what we were doing. I was like, Justin, what do I have to do? How do I get in rooms like this more consistently? I'm like, I'm sick of feeling like I have to fly halfway across the US or halfway across the world to recharge my batteries and have them deplete again as I'm going through all the stuff, the day-to-day problems and whack-a-mole. I'm like, I want to feel like this constantly. How do I get around these people? And he looks up at me and smiles and he goes, you ask. And it was the simplest answer, but it's so true. More often than not, we're looking for this thing, but we never have the courage or discipline to just throw it out into the universe and ask. By asking the question and taking a step back and allowing the universe or God or whatever he believes this is to answer, more often than not, here it will. And just that
Mhm.
simple question will now change your focus and start inviting more of those things into your life. And he happened to invite me into one of his groups that was local. And that was a really, really great reminder that more often than not, the one thing that we're forgetting to do is just ask for the thing that we want.
Mhm.
And either
Truth.
way, you're going to get the answer that you need.
So true. I was running the Gilbert Chamber had me in for their annual conference. They wanted me to be a keynote speaker. And I said, I can stand up here and talk about the power of proximity. I can talk about networking and why it builds your net worth and why the people that surround you are so important and how you build your social capital. And I can sit and tell them this for an hour. And then they're
Mhm,
going to walk out of here and no one's going to change the way they network because I've seen it happen over and over again. So, what I
mhm,
prefer to do is actually run some networking roundtables specifically in the way that I'm outlining them to be ran so they can ask for what they want. So they can show how passionate they are about the things that they do and talk a little bit about their personal life so people can get to know them on a personal level versus like, hi, Zach, what do you do? And I like, what if it was a dinner party? What if we treated it like that? So it was so interesting because it was full of women with about five men in the room. And women have a tough time asking for what they need. Very tough time because they're used to always being the one giving for what other people's needs are, right? We're raising kids, we're helping the neighbors. There's a lot of service that goes on in a nurturing heart, right? And that's just the basic DNA of a woman. Very difficult for them to ask. But when they did, and someone at the table was like, oh, yeah, I know someone that can help you with that. They were like, it was that easy to just ask. And someone would give that to me. Yeah, because that person wants to serve and you feel uncomfortable asking, but they want to serve you just like you want to serve them and give them contacts and help them.
mhm.
And so that was an interesting roundtable to run last night. It was a lot of fun to watch them do that. But I love that the number one thing you said was trust your gut, and the number two is ask. Ask for what you want because you will. I
Mhm.
mean, you've got to put it on a vision board and you've got to get it out there and you've got to believe it. I believe in that whole burning desire and belief. We've got to have it. It's got to be in
Mhm.
there. And you had that burning desire and belief. If you didn't care or it really didn't matter to you if this worked, you felt like this responsibility to turn the business around. And that was a burning desire that you had, and you were going to do whatever it took to make it happen. And that's a true testament. And how beautiful that you gave that back to your parents after all those years. So, what are you doing today, Zach? We're going to ask that question now that we know how you got here.
It was an interesting turn of events. As you mentioned, I had the opportunity to go and speak for Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi and consult for them. I helped develop programs, operational infrastructure, hire, train, onboard some really big teams of internal and external coaches. And through the process, what I realized, I mean, and actually what happened through the fitness industry is forever I was in love with health, wellness, fitness, anything to do with it, and I still am. But what I realized is I actually had fallen in love with business
Mhm.
because I know what it's like to go through those struggles. I know what it's like to be the solopreneur. Now I have a team of 3, now I have a team of 10, now I have a team of 100, and new level, new devil. It's never like it gets easy. You're just leveling up to that next set of problems that you now have to learn how to overcome in order to reach the next level,
Yeah.
right? And I wanted to be able to support people on that journey because I know how lonely of a road it can be. So I had a really great experience working with Tony and Dean. I got to be surrounded in rooms and share stages with some really amazing people, from Russell Brunson to Shonda Sumner to Alex Hermosi and Layla Hermosi to Brendan Burchard, E.T. Eric Thomas, the hip hop preacher. I mean, so just incredible people. And they really are incredible people. I mean, that was one of the things I loved is you see them behind the scenes and they're just as warm, loving, giving
Mm.
behind the scenes as they are on stage. Everything is congruent. Um, and the other thing that you realize is They're just human,
Mm-hmm.
just like the rest of us. They've just made some different decisions that have allowed them to reach different milestones and levels of success than most. And so that's very humbling and exciting. So the long story short is now what I'm up to is business consulting. My general focus is going to be working with coaches and seminar-based companies, primarily around anything sales and persuasion. So I help build out sales teams, establish the necessary decision lenses for the most appropriate decision-making paradigms to help guide the business through each stage of growth and evolution. So there's the leadership, the operational infrastructure, hiring, training, onboarding, the actual scripts and sales conversations that you have on a daily basis, either on the phone or on stage. So really all things sales, persuasion, influence, and leadership is what I'm up to now.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And you can reach Zach at thezachpalmer.com, ZAC. So thezachpalmer.com. We have all of the links here on Instagram at the Zach Palmer, as well on Facebook and LinkedIn, all of them. The Zach Palmer, the Zach Palmer. Let's just say that right now. I love that. And thank you for sharing your story with us today, Zach. I think it's so important that we realize that there's been quite a story that gets us to where we are today. We just don't pop out and just become this person. There's a lot of honing skills, a lot of learning, a lot of falling on your face, a lot of brushing yourself off, a lot of shame, fear, you name it, guilt. I could just go on with, I think, everything that we've felt through the process to get. And then when you start something new, it all starts over again. Like,
that it does.
Here we go.
Every time.
All something new again. So it's been wonderful having you on the show today and sharing your view on really what the power of proximity has done for you, and asking and getting in those rooms. And if we take one thing from today's episode, is that we ask. I mean, to my listeners, you're the only you that's ever been. You're the only you that's ever going to be. So if you don't like what your life looks like today, change it. Ask for something different. Do something different. Put someone different in your circle. That's really what it takes to take the first step to make that happen. And the power of proximity is real. There are books written on it. Zach talked about it today. I've talked about it in my life so many times on this podcast that if it wasn't for specific people, I mean, we got to meet Zach today because of the power of proximity of my friend. And that's why he's here and sharing his goodness with us. So thank you again, Zach, for being with us today. And to all the listeners out there, thank you so much for your loyalty and listening to Take the Leap. And until next time, don't forget, be you and be strong. Bye-bye for now.
We hope you enjoyed our show today, as our guests shared their secrets on designing their life by taking the necessary leaps to expand their influence and attract the right people and clients into their lives. To start these easy steps for yourself, be sure to visit www.colleenbiggs.net/freebies to download the 7 ways to increase your exposure today.